Now you've done that race.
Not good.
Can you tell us why?
I mean, we were slow. Ultimately a disappointing result, as I mentioned yesterday, to feeling so optimistic. I think through practice after P2, honestly, I felt so good in the car, and I think ultimately we went the wrong direction with the car, and then but our ultimate pace in the race was just not on par with the guys up ahead of us. But qualifying clearly is so important. If you look at where the Williams was, they did a great job. Congratulations to them. What an amazing result for us, to give everything. I mean, I'm happy I moved forwards from 12th, but I couldn't really care less for that position.
How much this weekend was to do with the tyres? Because I know yesterday you and Charles both after qualifying said you were on a tyre you didn't want to be on in your final runs, and then today you were on offset strategies. Do you think the team have missed an opportunity by actually not putting the optimal tyre on for you at the right time?
I mean, we'll internally we'll go and have a look and see what we could have done differently. As I said yesterday, for sure, operationally we could have done a better job, and so that's something we need to work on. But I do, as I said, I felt like I made progress today. I mean, out of our cars, my pace was decent, but the others are just rapid, and it was so hard to overtake here today. It's an unusual Baku race where just not really much overtaking and really hard to follow. But definitely disappointed to come away with nothing.
Hamilton lifted on the final straight in Baku, and Ferrari's season cracked wide open. The radio call came too late. Charles is behind, let him through. By then there was no margin left. 4/10 short of completing the swap, Hamilton crossed the line, boxed in a controversy that looked trivial on the timing screen, but seismic in its implications. Because this wasn't about 8th or 9th place. This was about trust. Trust in the radio, trust in strategy, trust in the culture of a team that hasn't carried a driver to a world championship in over 15 years. And in Hamilton's silence, in his refusal to blame Ferrari publicly, the whispers grew louder. Was this simply a procedural slip, or the first sign that Hamilton's Ferrari project is built on foundations not strong enough to carry the weight of a 7-time champion? On paper, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix should have been another learning weekend for Ferrari. No podiums expected, no radical upgrades on the car, just steady accumulation of points. Instead, the race ended with the paddock questioning whether the most famous team in Formula One can even manage its own drivers. The moment came in the final lap, Hamilton running 8th, Leclerc tucked in 9th, separated by less than 5/10. The instruction was clear in intent, but disastrously late in execution. Lewis, Charles is 1.5 seconds behind, let him pass. By the time the call reached Hamilton's ears, the gap had already collapsed to under a second. He lifted on the final straight, cutting throttle by roughly 1/10, but the start-finish line arrived before the red cars could reorganise. 4/10 short. Order unchanged. That sliver of time meant Ferrari lost control of their own plan. The swap failed, the race ended, and both drivers crossed the line in positions nobody had expected 30 minutes earlier, given how hard Hamilton had pushed on fresher mediums to attack the cars ahead. Leclerc's frustration was visible in Parc Fermé, a brief shake of the head before pulling off his gloves. Hamilton, by contrast, put the blame on himself. I calculated it badly. It won't happen again. No mention of the late call, no criticism of the engineers, just silence where everyone expected a spark. And that silence carried weight. Hamilton spent more than a decade at Mercedes, an organisation that built dominance on operational perfection. Team orders they were rarely questioned because they were delivered with surgical timing. For him to find himself improvising on the last lap of a race, not for victory, not even for a podium, but for 8th place, highlighted a culture clash that goes deeper than one botched message. The timing data doesn't lie. Ferrari had multiple corners to deliver the instruction and missed. What looks like a small procedural slip is a symptom of something larger, a structural delay in decision-making that no championship team can afford. So if Ferrari can't execute a simple swap in Baku, how do they handle the pressure of a real title fight? Hamilton's visible disappointment on Sunday didn't begin with the late radio. It started 24 hours earlier in qualifying, when Ferrari made a call that undercut his trust. Q2 was always going to be decisive in Baku, a circuit where track position trumps almost everything else. Across the paddock, the numbers were clear. The medium compound offered better balance in sector 2, less thermal dage across the rear axle, and a consistent delta of around 0.3 per lap over a longer push compared to softs once fuel came up. McLaren and Mercedes split strategies, keeping mediums ready for their lead cars. Ferrari rolled the dice. Hamilton was sent on softs, a gamble that might have paid off if the SF25 rear had been stable. It wasn't. Telemetry flagged lateral load spikes over 2,000 newtons on entry into turn 3 and again into turn 7, the rear stepping just enough to force micro corrections. On the radio he said it plainly, "Really struggling with the rear. Any advice?" It wasn't a complaint. It was a plea from a 7-time champion asking for actionable guidance mid-session. The answer never came. Instead of an offset run or a reset to mediums, the box doubled down on a window that didn't suit the balance. The consequence was predictable. Out in Q2, grid position 12, while rivals on mediums stitched banker laps in clean air. Statistically, Ferrari handed away roughly 0.35 seconds of average starting advantage and locked Hamilton into traffic where turbulent air kills front load and the long Baku run exposes any deficit in energy deployment. He summed it after. The mediums were clearly faster, about 0.3. That line wasn't just tyre talk. It acknowledged a deeper fracture between driver feel and engineering decisions. When those diverge, confidence erodes. And in Formula One, confidence is worth more than peak horsepower. Once a driver doubts the pit wall, every message carries not just information, but suspicion. Suspicion is how seasons unravel. Ferrari's biggest problem in Baku wasn't the radio or the tyre call. It was the SF25 itself, a car whose DNA seems to clash with Hamilton's instincts. On paper, the rear suspension concept aims for compliance under traction, letting the chassis squat and drive off slower corners. In practice, the car becomes unpredictable exactly when Hamilton demands precision, the first phase of braking and the handoff from longitudinal to lateral load. Saturday traces showed Hamilton losing an average of 0.18 seconds in the initial brake zone compared to Leclerc, not because he turned later, but because the rear wouldn't stabilise as load transferred. For a driver who built his legacy on late braking and absolute commitment, that's a violation of style. At Mercedes, the dialogue between driver and car was built on trust. The chassis did what he asked, so he could push beyond the reference. At Ferrari, that trust is being tested. When he says the mediums felt better, he's really saying the car isn't giving him confidence. And confidence can't be simulated into existence. This isn't a click of front wing or a damper tweak, it's conceptual. A rear design, flexible in theory but unstable in practice, has created a mismatch between car and champion. Fixing that isn't measured in sessions, it's measured in months. While Ferrari experiments, rivals consolidate. Every 10th Hamilton spends fighting his own rear axle is a 10th surrendered to McLaren, Mercedes, and a resurgent Red Bull. The question isn't whether Hamilton can adapt to Ferrari, it's whether Ferrari can adapt to Hamilton before the window closes. The swap controversy wasn't just a procedural failure, it reflected Ferrari's political problem. 2 leaders, no clear hierarchy. Charles Leclerc is the cultural anchor. 6 years in red have made him fluent in Maranello's rhythms. He knows the engineers, the sim habits, the communication shortcuts. When the call came on the last lap, his expectation was simple. The team would execute its own plan with the clarity he's used to. Hamilton would attack. If it didn't work, the position would be returned. That's the Ferrari he knows. Hamilton arrived with a different philosophy. At Mercedes, hierarchy was fluid but transparent. Orders were precise, delivered early, and framed as strategy, not loyalty. For him, Baku wasn't about favouritism, it was about process. But when the process fails, questions about favouritism inevitably follow. Would the call have been that late if Leclerc had been ahead? Would Ferrari risk Charles missing a swap in the final seconds? These aren't accusations, but they're the kind of questions that fester in a title-level environment. On raw pace, Hamilton and Leclerc are close enough to be the grid's most balanced pairing. Parity, however, is not peace. Without a clear leadership framework, every miscommunication becomes a referendum on trust. The paddock has seen this movie, McLaren's 2007 fracture, Mercedes' internal wars through 2014 to 2016, Ferrari's best eras featuring unambiguous primacy, Schumacher over Barrichello, Vettel over Raikkonen. Right now, Ferrari have neither clarity nor unity. What should have been a routine swap ignited a deeper doubt about how long the fragile balance can hold. Once drivers start wondering whether the wall tilts one way, fractures spread. upgrade allocation, setup direction, even body language in briefings. That's how one missed radio call can redefine a season. Baku looked inconsequential on the scoreboard. 8th for Hamilton, 9th for Leclerc, no trophies. But hidden inside those positions was a swing that matters. Because while Ferrari stumbled, rivals scored cleanly. Max Verstappen controlled the race from pole and won all 51 laps led to the flag. George Russell finished second and banked heavy points for Mercedes. Carlos Sainz took third for Williams, their first full-distance podium in years. Lando Norris, compromised by qualifying and a slow stop, could only manage 7th. Oscar Piastri, the championship leader, crashed out on lap 1, his first DNF of the season, breaking a 34-race scoring streak. The standings after Baku are unforgiving. Piastri 324, Norris 299, Verstappen 255, Russell 212, Leclerc 165, Hamilton 165, 121. In the constructors' table, McLaren still tower on 623 points. Mercedes holds second on 290. Ferrari sit third on 286, with Red Bull close at 272. Williams on 101. Racing Bulls on 72. Aston Martin 62. Sauber 55. Haas 44. Alpine 20. A successful swap would have been worth 2 extra points to Ferrari. It sounds tiny, but in a season where 2nd, 3rd and 4th are separated by handfuls, those 2 points matter. For Hamilton personally, the math stings more. 6th in the table, 203 points off Piastri, 91 behind Russell. Every race, Mercedes consolidates, while Ferrari trips, sharpens the question he won't ask publicly. Did he leave too soon? Project Ferrari's current scoring rate, just over a dozen points per weekend, and they finish around the low 400s. McLaren, even after their worst weekend, project north of 600. Gaps like that aren't closed by one upgrade, they're closed by relentless execution. In Formula One, small errors don't stay small. They compound until the championship picture is permanently distorted. So what happens when a 7-time world champion realises the numbers are already stacked against him? When Hamilton walked out of the paddock on Sunday night, he didn't explode, point fingers or raise his voice. He said, "I calculated it badly. It won't happen again." And, privately, indicated he'd apologised to Leclerc for the failed return. For a driver whose career has often included passionate radio spikes, that restraint is telling. Silence, in Hamilton's case, speaks louder than anger. Watch the body language. Shoulders tight in the mixed zone, voice flat in the pen. A quick nod to Williams rather than a long post-mortem about Ferrari. For a man who once defended his engineers after tactical misfires, that shift is significant. When Hamilton stops defending, it usually means he started doubting. Doubt doesn't need words. Engineers feel it when feedback shortens and becomes guarded. Teammates feel it when briefing dialogue loses its warmth. It's the invisible erosion of trust, not an explosion, but a slow corrosion that turns relationships transactional. Ferrari hired Hamilton for leadership as much as speed. They wanted the standard that dragged Mercedes to 8 straight constructors' titles. Those standards now turn into pressure. He's not in red to learn a system. He's here to win now. Every late call, every wrong tyre, every missed window becomes not just a mistake, but a breach of the environment he was promised. If Ferrari can't give him clarity and confidence, he won't shout. He'll do something far more damaging: withdraw. And when a champion withdraws, consequences extend far beyond a cockpit. Ferrari is not just a team, it is a culture. And culture is stubborn. Maranello has long blended passion, instinct and reaction. That can create brilliance. Opportunistic calls in 2017, daring aggression in Monza 2019, but it also breeds inconsistency. Hamilton is the embodiment of precision. Mercedes method: model every variable, quantify every risk, rehearse every order before it's ever delivered. When he says he felt so good in the car after FP2, that isn't emotion. It's the output of a well-tuned loop between driver and engineer. When that loop fails, as it did here, the system collapses. The clash was inevitable. Ferrari wanted Hamilton's aura. Aura comes packaged with expectation. He doesn't thrive in grey zones. At Mercedes, a team order arrived 4 corners earlier, phrased with zero ambiguity. At Ferrari, the same instruction arrived on the final straight, rushed and unfinished at the flag. That's not mere operational friction, it's philosophical incompatibility. Ferrari's reliance on intuition collides with Hamilton's demand for structure. Engineers defend decisions with tradition. This is how Ferrari works. Hamilton deals in evidence. Always means nothing if the data says otherwise. Problems like that aren't solved by one meeting or a crisper phrase on the radio. They're embedded in fabric. Hamilton's presence forces Ferrari to answer a question it has ducked for years. Can passion alone win a modern championship? If not, this marriage of heritage and precision may be less destiny and more incompatibility etched into the project's DNA. Formula One's brutality isn't just speed, it's time. Development windows open and close with merciless precision. The next 3 months may decide whether Hamilton's first season in red becomes foundation or failure. Ferrari's next significant package is targeted around Monza window races, with a rear-end refinement to stabilise braking phase, and a modest error rebalancing expected to shift front-to-rear load by roughly 1 percentage point under DRS. But Monza is still down the road, and before then lie circuits like Spa and Zandvoort, where rear instability is punished more than Baku. Every lap he spends compensating for a car that won't obey costs, not just time, but belief. The calendar offers no mercy. McLaren, even bruised, still lead on 623. Mercedes are trending up on 290. Red Bull, buoyed by Verstappen's pole to flag win in Baku, are only 14 behind Ferrari. By the time the rear update lands, Ferrari's grip on third could be gone and second out of reach. Layer the 2026 regulations on top. Every team is already splitting resources. Invest too heavily in patching SF25 and you risk being late to the new era. Pivot too early and Hamilton endures a wasted season, maybe two. The real deadline is psychological, not technical. Ferrari have until season's end to prove the system can bend to Hamilton's philosophy. If they fail, the danger isn't that he leaves, contracts bind. The danger is disengagement. Once a champion of his caliber drives without conviction in the project, performance plateaus and results spiral. That's why Baku wasn't just another Sunday. It was a warning. In Formula One, you don't lose a championship in one race. You lose it in accumulated cracks left unrepaired until the structure gives way. Ferrari's Azerbaijan weekend wasn't defined by 8th and 9th. It was defined by what those results exposed, a gap between process and precision, between philosophy and execution, between what Hamilton expected and what Ferrari delivered. In isolation, a failed order and a mistimed tyre call are solvable. Champions have overcome worse. Stacked together against a relentless calendar, they reveal a deeper fracture. The SF25 isn't giving Hamilton attack confidence. The engineers aren't speaking his language at critical beats. If Ferrari can't align culture, car, and communication quickly, this project risks becoming another what-if. Yet this is Formula One. Stories turn fast. One upgrade, one perfect weekend. One race where execution finally clicks can flip the narrative overnight. Hamilton built a career on resilience, finding strength when others doubted. The question isn't whether Ferrari can build speed. Baku's middle sector showed flashes when the balance held, and Hamilton clawed back hundredths. The question is whether they can build a structure worthy of the champion they signed. A structure that issues the swap 4 corners earlier, that puts him on the right compound in Q2, that gives him a rear he can lean on at 300 km per hour with the brake pedal at 90%. That is the standard. That is the cost of winning now. So here's where this leaves the championship picture as we leave Baku. Verstappen's victory halts McLaren's march and tightens Red Bull's grip on third. Mercedes banked Russell's P2 to strengthen second. Williams' 15-point haul resets their ceiling. McLaren still own both tables at centre of gravity despite a non-scoring Piastri. And Ferrari are stuck in the middle, close enough to dream, far enough to doubt. The next 6 weeks will do more than move numbers. They'll test identities. Is Hamilton's arrival the catalyst that forces Ferrari to modernise? Or the proof that Maranello's romance with instinct cannot coexist with a champion who measures trust in milliseconds? In the end, the answer won't be found in statements or apologies. It will be found in whether the next crucial radio arrives 4 corners earlier, and whether, when it does, Ferrari finally execute like a team ready to carry a legend back to where he belongs.